Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Danielle, aka Stitcherista here on YouTube, and today is another Stitch with Me. While I continue working on Carolyn Manning Designs Phoenix, I will say this every single time I do a Stitch with Me, I love this piece. I love the colors. Now, let's talk about fabric for it though, because what I didn't realize was that every Carolyn Manning Designs pattern, it gives you recommended fabric color, and most of the time it's white or black. Because remember, these are full coverage pieces. Now, this one I'm working on, they recommended black. There will probably be one that I will stitch on black. The only black fabric I like to stitch on is Fiberlicious Chalkboard. I like the Aida because you can still see the holes. You have to be under good lighting. But, and I understand why for this one they may have recommended black, because the colors would fucking pop like nobody's business, right? But I decided to stitch this on Vanilla Latte Aida from Hand Dyed Fabrics by Stephanie. I love that Aida. I love that color of Aida. I actually ordered a couple pieces of it just to have it, because not that it's going to take me, I mean, there's 9 pages to this Carolyn Manning Designs. The last 3 pages are really small, but 9 pages of a pattern. Yeah. And let's face it, seeing the holes on white fabric, much easier than black. We know this. But you have to remember, it doesn't matter what fabric you stitch it on. It really doesn't, because for me, when I frame these, I'll be framing it with a mat probably. So it's going to be right up against the stitching. You're not going to see any of the fabric. So yeah, it really doesn't matter, except what is important though for me, like if there's white in a piece in a pattern, I don't want to stitch it on white, because white on white or black on black, like that's where it comes in. I had a subscriber message me yesterday and ask, they picked out 2 Carolyn Manning Designs pieces and were like, what fabric would you recommend? And what I do is I pay attention to what Carolyn Manning recommends. And if it's like white, if you don't want to go with white because there's white in it, go with a light color, a light tan, an off-white maybe. And then if they recommend black, you could almost go with a darker color. Again, like I say, you know, the colors pop for Phoenix on this white. There's no doubt about that. And on black, it would have looked amazing, I think. Like, it would, as you're going along, you know, it would have looked unbelievable. I didn't even notice that they recommended black fabric for this. I was just like, there's no white in it. I'm going to fucking stitch it on white. Yeah. Okay. So I am pre-recording this voiceover. This is when you see this video on Thursday, I will be winging my way to my retreat. Let's go. Yeah. So food-wise, you know, I've already started thinking, the day I'm recording this is Tuesday. So I've already started like packing. Now, there is this group of, I don't want to be mean, but dumb motherfuckers that are going to this H2O car thing. And I can't lump everyone in that, but in the past, this car group has caused trouble in Ocean City. They've given the police trouble. They're loud. I mean, it's like chaos. And I was talking to Jill about it yesterday, and she made a good point that a lot of these people probably aren't vaccinated because they're young 20-something kids who think they're invincible. And instead of going to Starbucks, which is probably going to be insanity, I am bringing my own ground coffee and filters, because there is a small coffee pot in my room and a refrigerator and a microwave. I also ordered some sushi to be delivered DoorDash to my house that I'm going to take with me. Like, I'm preparing. I'm not even going to be stopping at Chick-fil-A, which is what I normally do. I'm bringing my own food. I'm bringing Gatorade. I'm preparing this time. I'm really preparing. And I'm still trying to pack where I don't have a lot of shit. I am going to bring my big suitcase though, because I will be able to fit a lot of stuff in there. Now it's going to be heavy AF, but all I really got to do is get it in the trunk of my car. So hopefully I can do that without too much trouble. But yeah, I want to have my suitcase and my stitching bag. That's it. I don't want to have like 8,000 fucking bags. Yeah. Okay. So today's story is a cold case. So we know it's going to be solved. Let's go. Because the last one I read, well, the one I read on Tuesday, which was unsolved, hate that. I like it solved. Okay. So this one is called Broken Wings. Ever since she was a teenager, Nancy Ludwig had only ever wanted to do one thing. She wanted to be a flight attendant. And this was a career to which the attractive brunette was perfectly suited. Nancy was bubbly and outgoing, friendly, compassionate, a real people person. Those are good qualities to be a flight attendant for sure. Did you ever see that movie? Everything reminds me of a movie. I think it's called, what's it called? It stars Gwyneth Paltrow and Christina Applegate. They're flight attendants. It was based on a true story, I think. Really good movie. I want to say it's like not Up in the Air, something with a view, something. I can't remember the title. I saw this movie so many years ago. That's how old it is. It's really good though. Okay, so those in her inner circle also said that she had a sense of adventure and a wicked sense of humor. Those were traits that would carry her through 2 decades of service aboard flights that brought her to all corners of the globe. And actually, old neighbors of ours, he's a pilot, she's a flight attendant, and they've been doing it for like 35, 40 fucking years. Yeah. Bill, they moved. They lived in our neighborhood and they moved, and Bill had went over there last week to watch the football game. And they were like, oh, you should have brought Danielle. But I was doing the arbitration and no, that's not happening. But they want me. There's a restaurant in our town, literally in our neighborhood. And they do a trivia night like every Wednesday. And they want me to be on their trivia team. So I told Bill, after the arbitration, I got to get through the arbitration because I can't do it while that's going on. Next year, maybe we'll consider that. But that would be a lot of fun to do that on Wednesday nights. Okay. So those were traits that would carry her through 2 decades of service aboard flights that brought her to all corners of the globe. By the 1990s, though, the 41-year-old Nancy was no longer working those long hauls. Tonight, she would be making the relatively short hop from her hometown of Minneapolis to Detroit, Michigan. Nancy's husband, Art, always insisted on dropping her off at the airport when she was working, and the frigid night of Sunday, February 17th, 1991 was no different. At 57, Art was 16 years older than his wife. But that age gap was no impediment to a happy marriage. Friends described them as the perfect couple. Tonight, as she kissed her husband goodbye, Nancy made her usual promise that she would call him after she had landed. And since this was a late night flight, she would be staying over in Detroit and returning the next day. At around 11 a.m. the next morning, a maid knocked on the door of Nancy's room at the Hilton Airport Inn in Romulus, Michigan. Getting no response, she announced room service and then entered using her key card. The drapes were still drawn, and so she crossed the room and opened them, and then she turned towards the bed. And what she saw there had her running for the door, barely stifling a scream. Not even bothering to wait for the elevator, she took the stairs, descending them 3 steps at a time. Minutes later, she arrived at the hotel security office and breathlessly announced that the guest in room 354 had suffered a miscarriage. What? It is easy to understand why the maid would have reached that conclusion. Nancy lay on her back in the bed with a blood-drenched sheet pulled up to her chin. Oh my God. Can you imagine being the maid, walking in that room and it's dark, so you don't even look at the bed, and then you open the drapes and you turn around and you see that? But this was no failed pregnancy. When the hotel detective peeled back the sheet, he saw immediately the horrible injury that had been inflicted on the victim. Nancy's throat had been cut from ear to ear. She had almost been decapitated. Oh my God. Murder. I haven't said that in so long. Murder. Oh, that's awful. And that gives me pause. Like what I'm telling you, when I go into my hotel room, when I stay by myself, I lock in every fucking lock on that door. Yeah. Because you don't know, right? Even if it's broad daylight, there's like usually two locks. There's like a lock up top that's like not a chain, but you can turn a lock. Yeah. Seriously. Now, a lot of people at the retreat actually share a room. I'm really funny about that. The only person I'll literally share a room with is Jill. And she's only gone to like one retreat with me, two, I think. Okay. So the first task in any homicide investigation is to establish the identity of the victim. And in this case, that should have been easy. The room was registered to Nancy. However, as detectives looked for verification of that ID, they came up against a roadblock. All of the victim's personal belongings, her purse, her luggage, even her Northwest Airlines uniform were gone, presumably taken by the killer. What? So what was the motive for the murder? Right? Why? Immediately I want to know why. Was this a robbery? Semen stains on the sheets said different. This appeared to be a particularly vicious sex crime. And I hope that recorded the last couple minutes of me talking, because my phone, I'm going to have to watch it from now on. My phone went like off and then it's locked. So I really hope, if the audio is disjointed, I apologize, because I'm going to keep an eye on that from now on. Okay. Just how vicious would soon be confirmed by the Wayne County Medical Examiner. Cause of death was determined to be blood loss due to the slitting of the victim's throat. Ugh. The cut that had caused this injury ran so deep that the knife had left notches on the spinal column. Fuck. You know what? That's a crime of passion. Like when you do that so viciously, right? But even that told only part of the story. Nancy had suffered numerous cuts all over her body. These were shallow incisions, and the ME could only assume that they had been inflicted as a form of torture. Nancy had also sustained horrendous defensive injuries to her hands. It appeared that she had tried to grab the blade and that the killer had yanked it away, almost severing her fingers. Eee! The crime scene also yielded semen and blood samples, which were sent for analysis. So we know it's a man, right? Well, at least we're going to know what happened. This is a cold case. So back in Minneapolis, Art was becoming increasingly concerned about his wife. Oh, God, poor Art. Nancy hadn't called him as promised, and that was not like her. You know, if that was, and I've always told Bill, like, we know each other's routine so much, and like, I call him, he calls me. Like, if something happened, we would immediately know. We would know. They had a set routine, and Nancy had never broken it in all of their years together. Art was just contemplating calling the airline or the hotel when the phone rang. Relieved, he picked it up, only it wasn't Nancy on the line, it was her supervisor. She told him that there was a police officer waiting outside and that he should go talk to him, and that he should also get a flight to Detroit. Art knew then that something terrible had happened to Nancy, and within the next minute, the life that he knew would be totally and utterly destroyed. Yeah. And so Art flew out to Detroit to officially identify the remains of Nancy. As if that were not hard enough, he also found himself hauled into an interrogation room and faced down by two grim-faced detectives. You know, this is standard procedure in a homicide inquiry. Detectives tend to start with the victim and work out from there. Those closest are usually the first suspect. Yeah, suspect number one. Even though he was in another city, he's going to be suspect number one. However, it was quite obvious that Art had nothing to do with Nancy's death, quite aside from the fact that he had been 700 miles away at the time of the murder. The man was distraught and broken, and he was soon struck from the suspect list. Yeah, obviously, right? That left police with possibly the hardest type of homicide to solve. The stranger killing. Yeah, I imagine that they're like, God damn it. Like, it's not that they want the husband to have killed the wife, but it probably is easiest when they can, you've seen that show, The First 48. You don't solve a crime in the first 48 hours. You usually don't. Beginning at ground zero, they began working the hotel, going door to door. Soon they would uncover 2 sightings of a potential suspect. The first was from a hotel employee who reported that he had seen a man hanging around in the stairwell. The man had looked out of place, he said, and seemed agitated. This same individual, described as medium build with short, thick hair and eyeglasses, was spotted by another witness, a flight attendant who was running up and down the stairs as a workout. She said that the man was standing in the 3rd floor stairwell and that he had creeped her out. Okay. Regrettably, the hotel's security system did not cover the residential floors, so the police could not get a more detailed description of their suspect. However, they did hear from another flight attendant who said that he had been awakened by noises that he thought might be muted screams. Ooh. He had gone out into the corridor to investigate, but then the screams had stopped, and so he had gone back to bed. All of this helped investigators create a reconstruction of the crime. They believed that the killer had been lurking in the stairwell, waiting for Nancy to arrive and open her door. When she did, he came up behind her and forced her inside. There, he would have been able to carry out his perverted desires without fear of interference, and according to the medical examiner, he had either raped Nancy as she lay dying or after she was already dead. Oh my God, I cannot. Why would they do this to this woman? I really hope it's explained, like, why. Because I just don't get stuff like this, right? This was a case that Detroit PD desperately wanted to close, and quickly. The perpetrator of this savage, ritualistic crime was very likely to do it again. Thus far, though, the investigation was coming up against a brick wall. Okay. Then a few days in, there was a meaningful break at last. A flight attendant came forward to report something he had seen on the night of the murder. He said that he had been looking out of his window at the Hilton when he spotted a man bundling a suitcase and a Northwest Airlines uniform into the trunk of a red-brown Chevy Monte Carlo. The man matched the description of the individual seen earlier in the stairwell of the hotel, leading investigators to conclude that he was likely the killer they were hunting. This was a significant break, and the police soon began distributing an identikit of the suspect and a picture of his car. With the case now receiving widespread coverage in the media, this was widely distributed and soon began generating leads. One tip-off led to an individual who frequently dressed in a Northwest pilot's uniform and claimed to fly for the airline. Fucking what? He turned out to be a creep who used the ruse to pick up gullible women. Another tip came from a man who got in contact with Art directly, saying that he had information about Nancy's death. Art agreed to meet with him, but the outcome was disappointing. The man turned out to be a conspiracy theorist who claimed that Nancy had been killed by Russian agents. What? No. And with that, the investigation began to run into trouble. A search for the suspect's car or motor vehicle records drew a blank, and so too did a $25,000 reward offered by Northwest Airlines for information. Eventually, Art became so frustrated with the lack of progress that he started his own investigation. I think that Bill would be the same way. Like, he wouldn't be able to let it rest. I really feel like that. If something happened to me or his daughter, he wouldn't be able to let it rest. I pray to God nothing ever does. Please, God, right? He fared no better than the police, though. Despite the committed efforts of everyone involved, the case went cold. So what year was this again? This was 1991. So, in 2001, so 10 years after the murder of Nancy, the Detroit Police Department received a federal grant to investigate some of the cold cases on its books. And since there was a semen sample in her case, it was a prime candidate for this type of initiative. So in 1991, I'm thinking that there wasn't like the DNA stuff. I don't know. So the sample was sent for DNA analysis and returned an immediate match, not to a suspect, but to another unsolved homicide. Margaret Eby, a music professor at the University of Michigan, had been butchered in her home on the Mott Estate in Flint in November 1986. And this is why I leave my fucking door locked all day long. When I'm home by myself, and I'm home by myself more than Bill is home, locked. When I walk to the mailbox, I'm looking around. Like, no joke. Yeah. So the case had remarkable similarities to that of Nancy. Professor Eby had been tortured with dozens of small cuts to her skin. Her throat had been slashed and she had been raped. In the Eby case, though, there was an additional clue, a partial fingerprint left on a faucet. At the time of the murder, the police had been unable to find a match, but now they resubmitted it and got a hit to a man named Jeffrey Wayne Gorton. Jeffrey, why'd you do this? On the face of it, Gorton made an unlikely murder suspect. The 39-year-old was married with 2 kids and employed in his family's landscaping business, and he had no police record. Doesn't mean a fucking lick of nothing, because there have been plenty of people, like, you've seen movies where somebody's a fucking serial killer and then the neighbors are like, oh, he was such a nice guy. Yeah, because people do all kinds of crazy fucked up shit, right? As investigators delved deeper, though, they made an interesting discovery. Gorton had done 6 months in a military prison in 1985 while serving in the U.S. Navy. He had then been dishonorably discharged. So what was his crime? Multiple counts of stealing women's underwear and 1 of assault. In the assault case, Gorton had knocked down a naval officer, ripped off her skirt, and run away with it. Can you imagine? These crimes had been committed when Gorton was in his early 20s, but they established a pattern. Gorton obviously had a fetish, and the question was whether that fetish had led him eventually to murder. Murder. That's how I should have said it. There was only one way to find out. They needed a sample of his DNA. And so Gorton was placed under 24-hour surveillance with detectives following him to a skating rink where he had taken his 2 children. There, officers watched as he drank a soda from a paper cup and then used a napkin. Both of these items were later retrieved and sent to the lab for DNA extraction and comparison, and it was a match. Police do that stuff all the time with the cups and the napkins and this. Because the stuff thrown away, anybody could take it, right? Yeah. So it was time for investigators to have a conversation with Jeffrey Wayne Gorton. Gorton readily agreed to come down to the station to answer questions when the department detectives called at his home. While that interrogation was underway, officers carried out a search of his residence, and here they would uncover a treasure trove of evidence. In the garage under a tarp was a red-brown Chevy Monte Carlo, exactly like the one seen near Nancy's crime scene. In the attic, they found a huge stash of women's underwear, hundreds of items, some of them labeled with the names of the original owners. And then there was the collection of VHS tapes. Gorton, it seemed, had rigged a hidden camera in the bathroom of his home and had been secretly filming guests and family members. What the fuck? On some of the other tapes were images of Gorton himself dressed in women's underwear and posing for the camera. What? Nothing in this haul of evidence linked back to Nancy or Professor Eby's murders, but prosecutors already had enough to make their case. With Gorton in custody, a search warrant was obtained for his DNA. This was again compared to the semen from the crime scenes and again returned a match. Jeffrey Gorton was then arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. But one question still remained unanswered. Why had Gorton targeted these 2 women for death? It turned out that Nancy and Margaret were just unlucky. Theirs was a case of wrong place, wrong time. Gorton was an opportunistic killer. In Margaret's case, he had been installing a sprinkler system on her estate where she lived. Nancy had been unfortunate to be allocated the room that was directly across from the stairwell where he was lying in wait for a victim. On such small margins do the wheels of fate turn. That is a fucking frightening. Like, just the smallest, minute interaction with someone. Oh my God. Tried and found guilty of the murder of Nancy, Jeffrey was sentenced to a term of 40 to 80 years in prison. In the EB trial, he entered a plea of no contest and received a life's term. The Michigan police have not thus far linked him to any other unsolved homicides. It would not be a surprise if there are other victims, though, because Jeffrey fits all of the criteria for a serial killer. It didn't say anything about it. He said he was married. Like, can you imagine? As his wife? What? Can you imagine? Like, I know I've talked about this movie that, I can't think of the woman and the man. They're well-known people, though. It was based on a Stephen King short story. It's called A Good Marriage. Really good. Woman finds out her husband's been a serial killer for 25 years. And what does she do with that information? Watch the movie. The movie's not that long. It's so good. Oh my God. How she finds out and then what she does. Oh, and motherfucking G. Like, yeah. Really good. So highly recommend that movie too. Okay. That is the end of that story. So let's read a positive affirmation for success and happiness. I found this site, bookmarked it. Okay. Now, I know many of us struggle with self-esteem. Am I good enough? First of all, you are. However you are good enough right now. So this one is by Ram Dass, an American spiritual teacher, psychologist, and author. In his book called Be Loved Now, he wrote, "You are loved just for being who you are, just for existing." I think so many times we feel like we have to prove ourselves, always be in competition with people. We don't. We really don't. You are loved just for being who you are, truthfully. And the most important relationship you're ever going to have is the one you have with yourself. So please, please, please remember, you are enough. Absolutely. Okay. I hope you guys are all having a great day. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you so very much for watching and subscribing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.